Okay, so how do we do our own material? Very fast. Okay, so first of all, you need to know where the material is, and we talked about it. So check some of the older video tutorials on how where you find the material of something, no? Like a wall, you will go to edit the type, and then you will search here for the layers, no? And you need to know whether it's one side or the other one and change the material. So I'm going to use one of these walls. I'm not sure which one is interior exterior because it's an interior partition. So what I'm going to do is change this finished material from gypsum wall board. I'm going to make a different material here. So one side of this partition will be a completely new material. Okay. To start a new material, you go down here and you say new material. You should right click on the material and say rename. Funk material, funk mat. Okay, funk mat is going to be from now on one side of this partition. Okay, now to make sure that funk mat is working and it's in the side, we're saying I'm going to use the surface pattern to make it solid and red. Let's see if that works. There you go. I flipped it. So I had to flip it because I was not seeing the red, and that means that I was thinking probably it's in the other side of the partition. Let me go back to that. If I go to materials, on the material editor, I can change funk mat. I can do it there, or as I was doing before, selecting the wall, edit type, edit, and then go to the funk mat here, changing that material. And this is what I changed. We talked about this in the previous video tutorials. All of the graphic world, this is how we see things in the interface in Revit. This is on the shading mode, and these are pretty much on the hidden lines mode and shading zone as well. So whatever you change here, when you're cutting that wall, you can tell how the pattern should be. And whenever you're seeing it, you can tell here the type of pattern and color. For example, I'm gonna use now concrete and red. I say okay and okay. That's a red concrete right there. Now again, this is great because many times you want to present your project in a more vector-based quality. So you can export this, as you know, either as a DWG, and it will give you all of those lines, and then you can take it to Rhino, etc., etc. But you could also just print as PDF, no, this particular render one view, and that will be a vector-based line drawing that you can take to Illustrator as well from the PDF. Okay, so this is great. The second you do this, the second you put the shadows, it's a bit more tricky because if you print it, it will create a raster base, so you lose the vectors right there. It could be what you want, but maybe not. Okay, how do we apply a new material there? Again, the funky mat. When I render this, this is going to be the same as the standard, whatever the standard is, which is probably like a gray thing or something. It's not going to render like in the graphic quality within the material library. Okay, there it comes. Why is taking longer? Because I actually have it as a printer, 3 dpi. So that, for testing again, I will keep it as screen. But you can already see how it's a bit better quality. It's under medium. Anyway, you see how it's gray, no? So I'm going to stop that, otherwise it could take a while. So I go to material library. I search for my funk mat. And again, you can change this if you want to do vector world or whatever it is. But appearance is what we want to change. Okay, you can see the rendering in different ways. You can see it as a sphere, but you can also see it as a cube. The different ways to see that rendering. Okay, normally the sphere is the most popular one because it gives you more and more shadows and so on. Information if you want to write stuff here about what it is, the material. Color. So if you wanted to render it, now it's rendering gray, but you can render it in color. That makes sense. So if I say that, and I'm gonna render a couple of times, medium, but screen. I'm gonna do draft so we can go faster. There you go. That's it. A very clean, simple red wall. You want it, you can have it. Okay. Material library, font material, and appearance. Always appearance. Again, you can change that. You can also assign an image. It might be that's what you want, but let's imagine it's just a simple red wall, but it has a little bit of reflectivity. Okay, you can do that. You have the preview there of how it looks. So that would be a bit more like a painting, a very glossy painting of a red quality. And if you want to do a simple red glossy paint or something, I wouldn't necessarily do that material myself, just because you probably have it under the library. No, there is the reflected material. If you want to do that, I would create another material. I would call it red glossy paint or whatever it is. Rename. And again, remember, you can always click on the asset browser and search literally under the option of appearance library. Search for paint. I think there was one paint here, glossy, and then double click on this one, and it will be exported or imported to this place. No?
If you don't see like the color you want, say you want like a gray, or I don't know, like a green or a purple, they don't have it there. Is there a way to make your own color with like a paint material?
Great question. If you actually I imported the red one, or choose the one that is closest to the one you want, and then once it's here, it's yours, meaning you can edit the things that are going to be talking about. For example, the color. You can change the color here. And I will just keep the rest of the settings as they are if you like the reflectivity and whatever qualities. Just change whatever you want in the color.
Okay.
So you double click, it comes here. From that point on, it's yours to redefine as you see fit. Let me go back to our funk mat. Okay, that's a glossiness. You can also change the glossiness effect here. That should be seen here slightly, or you can just change also the reflectivity to more or less elements, and you can pretty much sense how it is by looking at the preview. Actually, a change of color and reflectivity and adjusting the direct and the oblique reflectivity, it's enough to get a nice kind of a painty quality. But you can bring some of this from the library as you see fit. Okay. The cutouts. There's another thing. It's the bumps. We'll talk about it in a second. But if you want a simple one, again, you can change the color reflectivity. If you were to add transparency, you can add. But the problem is that this particular wall has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers. 4 layers of gingerbread wall, and then the structural in the center. So if I add transparency, I'm only adding to 1 layer. So it's not going to work for us. And I'll talk about this in another class. What if you want a semi-translucent or whatever material? Then what you need to do is a partition made of only 1 layer. Call it probably a glass or translucent glass, and then change the transparency settings for that particular material. So the amount of that transparency will be pretty much the translucency. And then you can fade the image, you can add translucency here. So there are several very simple parameters that you can set for transparency. But again, it's very important that you only have one layer in that partition, because again, if you have another layer that behind its digital wallboard, you're not going to see through that. Okay. Anyway, let me uncheck this and go back to what if we want a particular image, no? So let's say pattern Google images. And I think I've done this one before, but whatever, I'll do it again. This pattern of colors. Make sure you save these images that are actually going to be part of your rendering that are actually necessary. If you have a pattern, an image, or the way all of the students that I've showed you before, that they all had an image that they liked, and probably are the ones that you already have in your panel number 2. You can click here in the middle of image and search for that image. Open. Here it is. Now, needless to say that how big that image and how small is going to matter in how this looks. No? So what I'm going to do is say, okay, and I'm going to take it here to realistic. Look at it. It's like one little panel of that image and repeat it many, many times. You might find that this is the case, or maybe yours is way too big. Depends on the size of the image. Okay, you might see it. Regardless, almost everybody's going to have to adjust that pattern. So you go to your material, appearance, and you need to go to that little triangle here and say edit image. Here's where you change the pattern repetition. Okay, this is saying is 1 foot by 1 foot. That's pretty much the size in reality of that, of how that is repeated. So you can very easily change the position. You can change a little the brightness. You can also do that in Photoshop. You go to Photoshop and you change some of the parameters of brightness and so on. But what matters most is here, the scale. Maybe the offset as well, the position, but the scale is the most important. How big or how small that is going to influence how it repeats. So if I say 10, and if I have this log, 10 feet, that's going to change that number right there, and you can say done, okay, and notice how that has changed automatically. Now you might say, I like, I don't like. Well, normally I can already tell you it does not look good that the pattern is repeated in such an obvious way. If it's something like this one, maybe it's a tile, and the tile, when it's repeated, then it creates a logical effect of continuity. But in this case, it doesn't look good. So maybe in this case, we want to go to materials and make it even bigger. By the way, before I do it and make it bigger, you can see how to repeat. You can set whether it repeats or not. And you can change the offset here for X and Y. Let's say 5 feet. And that's, you see how that offset is going to work. So maybe for tiles could be useful. And that offset the whole set of image. It starts now from a different point. For the image, there's also the options if you want to tile it here as tiles. And that allows you to create this kind of a tile condition, which could include a tile appearance and with an image itself, but that's a bit more advanced. Let's go back to the image as we were before. So I'm just going to make it bigger. Turn that to 0. And then just maybe just 20 to be sure. There you go. And maybe the top. You can also make them not respecting the proportions of the image. And you can just say here, unlock And then I believe width, height, you can say here 30. Good. So now it's the whole thing. So that's how we place an image. You're going to have to play with how the image appears. There's another trick, and I will talk about it in the next class, which is I want this scale, but when it meets another one, it doesn't look good. That's an issue of Photoshop that you need to do a transformation of how the tiling works. But for now, I think this changing the scale is quite useful. Other things that you can do in the material, well, if we render that, it's going to be just the image right there, but you can also change a little bit the glossiness and give a little reflectivity. So what do I do? So as you change these things, I'm basically changing the reflectivity amount, and it's giving you different previews here. I think in general reflectivity, you either want it like very mirror is to the right, or it's just slightly reflective. And that should also affect the way this looks. Probably transparency doesn't make sense here. Cutouts, if you want to create an area that you want to see through, in our case doesn't work because there are many layers again. And self-sufficient, if you want that material or that object to create light, I don't use that one very much. The bump is important. The bump, what it does is a texture quality. So if you have like a concrete or so on, it will give you an effect of being textured. Normally, if you click on bump, you want to select pretty much the same image. Normally, you turn it into grayscale, but you can select the same image. And the way it works is that this image should be also placed at the same scale, obviously. So you have to place whatever it is. It was 20 and 30 feet. Oops, look. So it has to be the same scale. And what it does is that the darker areas are going to be pushed in slightly, and the lighter area is going to be pulled in. So it's a little like it's going to try to give that effect of texture. It doesn't work very well for this particular example because this is not a texture element. It's probably like a painted wall. But if you have a concrete or a earth type of material, or like a textured stone, this bump is very useful because it will also transform a little how it reflects and how it actually is textured. The amount, you can take it to very little or very much, and you can see a little how the effect happens. This tint is if you want to add like a coloring quality to that, because I normally don't use that either. Okay, so if you say okay, then you will render. Again, you can go to the draft. So it has a little reflectivity, so you can see how the floor here it is, slightly. It's reflecting slightly the glass of the curtain wall. You can see a little bit there, which gives it a nice kind of a feeling. And it's difficult to see because low res, but I think there's also like a slight variation of the texturing there. Now notice this means it's low res, so you definitely want to change that as best as possible. And that will be under best or high and then printer. Okay, let me see. I think yes, let's leave it there.